All right, my friends, let us do a few more practice problems together so you can get a good handle on how to solve these decimal division problems, and then you can practice a couple on your own. So I'm going to start off with dividing 6/10 divided by 2. Now remember, when we begin our decimal division problem, we want to start by bringing this decimal place up into our answer spot because we don't want to forget to do that in the end and get an incorrect answer. So once I've brought that decimal point up, I can go ahead and solve this like a regular division problem. 2 goes into 0, 0 times. If you want to skip that 0 and go right into the 6, you can. But just remember that when we give our answer tenths, hundredths, and there's nothing in the ones place, we always put a 0 there. That's just a convention of how we write our decimals. So I like to go ahead and just go ahead and do that division right there so my answer has the 0 it needs. 0 times 2 is 0, and we can go through that step and we get an answer of 0. Okay, now we bring down our 6. 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6, and so when we subtract, we get a 0, nothing left over, and our answer is 3/10. Let's do another one. I'm going to do 8/10 divided by 4. Now, remember that when this problem is written out, it looks like 8/10 divided by 4. And so the number that is first is the dividend. That's the number that goes under the division sign when you're solving it. So make sure you get these in the right order or that will screw up your answer. Now, 8/10 divided by 4. I'm going to bring my decimal point up. I'm not going to forget to do that first step. And then I can go ahead and solve it. 4 goes into 0, 0 times. 0 times 4 is 0, and we subtract, we get 0. Bring down the 8. 4 goes into 8 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. When I subtract, I get a remainder of 0. And so my answer, 0.8 or 8/10 divided by 4, gives me 2/10. Okay, so those are the problems that I showed you in the introduction video, or similar to them. I'm going to add a number that has tenths and hundredths. So how about this number? Now we read this number as 88 hundredths. And so I'm going to divide 88 hundredths by 2. Remember that the first number is the dividend. And so when I set up my division problem, that's the number that goes under the division sign. 88 hundredths divided by 2. And the first thing I'm going to do is bring up that decimal point so that my answer is correct. Beginning to divide, 2 goes into 0, 0 times. 0 times 2 is 0. I bring down that first 8. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. I'm left with a remainder of 0, but I'm not done yet because I have another place value. So I bring down that second 8. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. I get a remainder of 0. And when I look up at my answer, I find that I have an answer of 44 hundredths, or 0.44. So this gives me 44 hundredths. So again, even if I have hundredths instead of tenths, I'm still going to solve it in the same way. I just need to make sure I bring up that decimal point. Let's do a slightly more complicated problem. So I'm going to solve 4/10 divided by 5. Now you're going to notice right away that unlike these other problems that I've already done, the divisor doesn't go evenly into the dividend, at least what we can see automatically. We know that 2 goes into 8s really easily. We know that 2 goes into 6s really easily. So we can see that. So let's look at what this problem is going to do, because we know 5 can't fit inside 4. So think about this for a second. I'm going to write this problem out. 4/10 divided by 5, and I'm going to start by bringing up that decimal point. Now, I'm just going to start it how I've done the rest of them. 5 goes into 0, 0 times. 0 times 5 is 0. So I'm going to bring down the 4. But even when I bring down that 4, I'm going to notice 5 doesn't go into 4. So what do we do in these situations? Well, we do what we do in normal division problems. We're going to add a 0 and bring that down. So when we bring down the 0, we're going to divide 40 by 5. And we know that 5 can go into 40. 5 goes into 40 8 times. That 8 oh, my apologies, I almost messed you up. That 8 doesn't go right above the 4 because it's not going into just 4, it's going into 40. So I need to make sure I put that 8 in the right place value. I put it over the 0 because 8 is going into that whole number 40, right? So I put a 0 and then I write my 8. 8 times 5 is 40. When I subtract, I get a remainder of 0. So don't make the mistake that I almost made by just putting it in the next place value available. Really be careful and notice what number you're dividing and then place the number, your answer, above the right place value. So in this case, it was the number 40 being divided by 5, and so I put the 8 above the 40. But we know that this is a decimal, right? So when we read our answer, we find that 4/10 divided by 5 gives us 0.08 or 8/100. And so that's what you do when you have a number that doesn't go in evenly. Just like regular division problems, you add a 0 and bring that down. And as long as you kept your decimal in the right spot, you are good to go.